Welcome to In the Studio with a 21st century perspective on the greatest rock and roll albums in history.
You're welcome. Guitar up. 1, 2, 3.
I'm Redbeard, and today, in the studio, it's the 30th anniversary of Queen's #1 album, The Game. Writing in the AllMusic Guide, Greg Prato reminds us that, and I quote, along with 1975's A Night at the Opera album, Queen's 1980 chart topper, The Game, is one of their best and most commercially successful records. But The Game was the polar opposite of opera, composition-wise, whereas their 1975 classic was completely over the top and bombastic, including Bohemian Rhapsody. The album The Game, 5 years later, was full of succinct songs that included their trademark hard rock and ballads, as well as styles previously unexplored by Queen: funk, disco, rockabilly, new wave. Prato concludes, although the band would remain superstars throughout the rest of the world, the Game album proved to be Queen's last true hit studio album in the U.S., end quote. With 4 top 10 albums in barely 5 years, Queen had stretched out with some creative risk-taking on their preceding album in 1978 called Jazz. With The Game in 1980, Queen decided to place more emphasis on rhythm and less on the lavishly layered vocals that had become quite a trademark. The first indicator that Queen were up to something different came with a single release, Crazy Little Thing Called Love, in January of 1980, which, according to Queen drummer Roger Taylor, preceded The Game's release by many months.
We recorded that song really 6 months before the rest of the album. And I remember while we were actually in the studio in Munich in Germany doing the rest of that album, that song had already been released. And we were there, and I remember somebody phoning up and saying, hey, your record's just gone to #2 in America. I mean, we all went out and had a celebration. Wow, great. And then the next week we got the phone call again, hey, the record's #1 in America. And it seemed unreal because we were on the other side of the world, and we hadn't even finished the album, which this single was from. We were still working on it. So we thought, oh, we're off to a good start here, you know.
What a great swinging song. Crazy Little Thing Called Love from Queen came out 6 months before the rest of the album, according to Brian May and Roger Taylor of Queen.
I don't think I was even there.
I don't think you were.
I was out of the room. It always happens. If I go out for a couple of hours, they create something.
See, we come up with a winner.
Yeah, I came back and they'd already put down the backing track, and Roger just had the live drums. Freddie had played acoustic guitar. It was because that rhythm on there is Freddie. I don't think I played any of that.
Yeah, it is. Rhythm. It's Freddie on the acoustic, and it took half an hour to record. It was like that. It just came down. It had a great feel.
Yeah, it's like
I remember he came in the studio. He says, "My dear, I just wrote this in the bath." And he did. He'd just been lying in the bath. He had this thing, the chords would go like that, and I call it Crazy Little Thing Called Love. And there it was, and it was very simple, very easy, and it had a great, fresh sound to it. I think Brian did a really nice Telecaster solo on that, which all fitted in great with that slight rockabilly kind of edge, you know. We wanted it like almost a slightly early Elvis feel, you know. That was the idea. I mean, that's not easy to get. But the record did sound good, I think, the record.
Yeah, it's good. That was a good thing for Mac, who became our engineer for those couple of albums. And producer, well, co-producer, because I guess we're always the producers, really, being pig-headed as we are. I think Mac secretly had wanted to work with us for a long time, and he had all these things he wanted to try with us. And he was very good at getting drum sounds very quick, and the drums sounded very big. In that particular, there was a drum booth, and he used to have mics inside and outside it, didn't he? You know, so he would stick up a few faders, and the drums would sound crisp and big, you know, without sounding washy. They just sounded great. So that was a bonus, really. He was good, Mac, actually. He brought out some things. We were a bit set in our ways by that time. I think we thought there was one way of doing things, and Mac said, and he's a very dry German, you know, but he sounds English because he'd worked with Jeff Lynne for years, so he had a kind of Birmingham come German accent. He sounded more English than anything else, and he would say, I mean, talking about the guitar, you know, I said, well, I can make my guitar sound like a Telecaster, like those old rock and roll records. And he said, if you wanted to sound like a Telecaster, play a Telecaster. You know, so he did. He got me to do it, which was unusual. That's one of the few times I've ever played a solo on something that wasn't my regular guitar. And it did work very well. I used Roger's Telecaster, one of his collection, because Roger collects extremely rare guitars. So I used one of those, and it just worked out. Sounded fine.
Crazy Little Thing Called Love was not only unlike any Queen song previously, it presaged a rockabilly revival at the time.
There was a movement which we didn't know anything about in America at that time to sort of revive rockabilly, and it happened soon after Crazy Little Thing. So soon after that, people were saying, oh, well, of course you pioneered this resurgence of rockabilly, and we were saying, well, actually, we don't know anything about it. We just made a track that we liked.
That's right. I remember actually one of the things which made me very proud was that John Lennon said in a Rolling Stone or some rag, some article, he said something like, "Oh, I heard a Queen record," and it's obviously that's where he comes from, you know, early rock and roll roots. He said, and it made me want to get back in the studio, and I thought, wow, fantastic.
That's great.
You know, to have actually had any little dent on the life of somebody like Lennon is great.
Dragon Attack from The Game, Queen's #1 seller in 1980. It's a song that's a bit of a musical Frankenstein monster, according to Queen guitarist Brian May.
It was put together in an unusual way. In fact, I don't know if I can really claim to have written it, because, in fact, we just jammed for a little while when we were feeling good one night and put down the basic riff. And the song was made, I just sat in the studio and cut it up and made it into a song. And put the vocal on, obviously. I mean, the vocal has to go on last because we didn't have and actually make it into a song which meant something. But all that guitar stuff was all done on the night. It was all done, and I just used the bits that I liked.
Queen's The Game album was recorded in Germany 10 years before unification.
John and I had met, well, John actually, I think, first met a guy called Mac, and I think John and I went down. This guy had been working a lot with the Electric Light Orchestra at the time, and we'd heard about this very famous studio in Munich, and John and I went down one afternoon and had a look at it, and John was very for trying something there. So when we'd been around the world that year, and so we thought we'd just start something in Munich, and as the very first session, the first day, I think we got the backing track to Crazy Little Thing and some things, so it seemed to work well at the time, so we went back there and finished the album there, didn't we? Yeah, it seemed like a good thing for us to be working with this new guy, who worked very well for us at the time, you know. Yeah,
the function of a producer is really to bring out the best in a group in the studio environment, and after you've made, I think, 8 albums as we have, I don't know if it's 9, you pick up most of the things in the studio which contribute towards doing that, you know, so you're bound to be able to mainly to produce yourselves, I think. Occasionally a producer can fulfill the function of choosing the material as well and arranging the material, but again, we don't need anyone to do that. We know what we want to do.
That's coming soon from Queen's 1980 album The Game. Coming up, the ferocious album tour pace prior to recording The Game. For this and your other favorite rock star interviews, visit inthestudio.net. I'm Redbeard. You're in the studio with Queen for the 30th anniversary of The Game.